Hello, I'm happy to welcome you back again tonight. I hope you enjoyed my last story, and I'm going to read to you another story from my book, The Lives of God's Poor and Obscure. And tonight's story is A Little Servant Girl. Abel Beth Maacah is a small town near the border between Israel and Syria. My 3 older brothers, 2 older sisters, and I were born there. My family were Israelites and worshipped Yahweh. I was barely 7 years old when they came. Soldiers and more soldiers from Syria, killing many of our neighbors and friends, men, women, and even babies. They took many others away as prisoners to use them as slaves in their own country. My family watched helplessly as they came closer and closer to our house, the last on the edge of town. I was so afraid and clung tightly to my mother's hand. What would become of us? Would we all be killed? Or would they be tired of the rampage and show a little mercy? But no, they kept advancing. Finally, they arrived at our home. Before they burst in, I tore away from my mother and ran terrified into the back of the house to hide under a pile of fleeces where I could peek out without being seen. I expected all my family to hide. Hopefully, they would think the house was empty and go away. We would be safe then. But the others were so stunned, they just stood rooted to the floor, paralyzed in fear. Suddenly, the soldiers were pushing their way inside, shouting strange words, swinging swords that shone like miniature flashes of lightning in the glow of the oil lamps. I was horrified, yet those little details fascinated me. The scene momentarily transfixed me. Confusion reigned. My heart beat so hard I was sure the soldiers would hear it above all the terrible noise. One evil-eyed soldier grabbed my mother and did something to her I did not understand. She begged for mercy. She cried and cried. When the soldier finished, he just stabbed her. I knew she was dead. My heart froze. I dared not ponder what these brutes were doing to my beloved family. My father had been loudly entreating our great God, but his prayer was cut short when another soldier slashed him with a sword, and his life too was snuffed out. I waited, holding my breath to discover the fate of my brothers and sisters. Surprisingly, they did not kill them. Instead, they stripped them almost naked, bound their hands, and led them away. They were all crying out to God for help, but it was too late, much too late. At first, I was numb, as if in a dense fog. Suddenly, total realization of the whole nightmare struck me. My sensitive young mind could not bear so much. Everyone I loved, everyone who had cared for me, had been instantly taken from me with such horrifying brutality as I had never before imagined. I understood in a flash that I was now alone, so alone and afraid. My heart felt as if it would shatter into a million pieces. No longer could I restrain the sobs that began bursting like an erupting volcano from deep within me. It did not matter now what happened to me. What was left to care about? The captain of the army must have heard me and returned to seek the source of the hysterical crying. When he finally located me, he lifted me up in his arms and carried me away with him. My mind reeled. The fear of being killed, or if allowed to live, of that nameless place to which I would be transported, haunted me. That dreadful affair took place several years ago, but it is still imprinted on my mind as vividly as though it happened yesterday. And yet, though I can easily recall the terror I felt, I do not struggle with that same fear today. I am at peace. My captor's name, I soon discovered, was Naaman. He was commander of the army of the king of Aram, or Syria as it is also known. This man proved to be very kind, though at first I was too frightened and overwhelmed to recognize the fact. His name even means pleasantness, and truly he did have a very good-natured way about him, at least when he was at home. I imagine he is as strict with his troops as he is kind to my mistress and me. The commander did not bind my hands as the soldiers did to all the other prisoners. He did not remove my clothes, but gently wrapped me in one of the sheepskins I had hidden under. I believe I was the youngest captive. Evidently, Naaman felt sorry for me and refused to let anyone kill or harm me. I was grateful for that. On arriving in Damascus, Naaman delivered me to his own home and handed me over to his wife, who also treated me with compassion. She bathed me, fed me what little I could swallow, gave me some clean clothes, and put me to bed. I imagined I would never be able to close my eyes again without reliving that last dreadful hour in what had been the only home I had known. But I was emotionally drained, physically exhausted, and as soon as I lay down in that soft, warm bed, I fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. When I awoke the next morning to a room filled with sunshine, Naaman was nowhere to be seen. He had to report to the king. His wife fed me again and showed me every kindness. I never did discover what became of Jacob, Joseph, and Benjamin, Sarah, and Rachel, my brothers and sisters. I could not help but wonder what was to become of me, little Hannah, daughter of Jehudi, Ben Judah, and my mother, Sarah. Naaman's wife was a pretty woman, short and slim. Her dark hair shone like ebony in the sunshine. Though quiet-spoken, she carried on an almost constant conversation, perhaps to distract me from thinking about my family. Although she did after a while ask me questions about my mother and father, whether I had brothers and sisters, what their names were, she never mentioned that fateful day when I last saw them. I needed to talk about them to believe they really had existed, that my past was not merely something I had dreamed about, but I dreaded thinking of them as they were on that final day. After a few weeks of, in Naaman's words, getting used to my new home, he informed me that I was to become a servant to his wife. My task would be simple until I grew a little older. Then I would be expected to help with the cleaning, cooking, and gardening. I would fetch water from the river and take the clothes there to do the washing. I would serve my master and his wife their meals as well. When I knew them better, I came to understand that my master Naaman had a disease called leprosy. I had learned of this condition, but had never seen a person afflicted with it. Anyone with this disease would have had to live apart from the rest of the population in Israel. Even when a leper was healed, he still had to go to the priest and go through a certain ritual before he could once again join his family and friends. That is part of our law. Leprosy is a terrible ailment and sometimes progresses to the extent that parts of the body, such as fingers and toes, actually drop off. It is very contagious and had always frightened me whenever I heard the adults speak of it. By this time, I had learned to love my master and mistress, so I was not afraid. I was very sad that Naaman was afflicted in this way. Then I began to recollect stories I had listened to at home about a holy man in Israel. They told how Elisha had performed miracles, and I was sure that he could heal Naaman if only who would be willing to go and see him. So one day I spoke to my mistress. Oh, if only my master could go to the holy prophet of Israel. He lives in Samaria and has done other miracles. I know for sure that Elisha could heal my master of this terrible disease if only he could go there. When my mistress, with a puzzled expression, told her husband what I had said, his eyes brightened. He took courage and began to hope for a cure. He went immediately to the king and reported the news. The king gave him permission to go to Samaria to visit this prophet. He even wrote a letter to the king of Israel in Samaria to be taken by Naaman as an official introduction. After my master returned to Damascus, he told us of his adventure. When he delivered the letter to the king of Israel, there was a great commotion. The king tore his robes and cried out in anguish. Naaman was confused. Apparently, the letter contained a command to the king to heal Naaman. The Syrian king did not understand Israel's God or the role of his kings and prophets. I presume he thought himself to be a powerful king who had the right to demand whatever he wanted. Perhaps he believed that nothing transpired outside the king's jurisdiction. But Israel's king was so disturbed and understood the letter as a threat, a challenge to war, an excuse to make more trouble in Israel. Nevertheless, the prophet, having had news of what had taken place, dispatched word to the king to send Naaman to him. And so, with his horses and chariots, my master went to the house where Elisha lived. But the prophet deeply disappointed him. Elisha did not even go to the door to greet Naaman, but rather sent a message in a very impersonal way by his servant. He told Naaman to go to the Jordan River, the largest and most important river in Israel, and dip himself 7 times in the water. This the servant promised him would heal him of his leprosy. But my master was insulted that the prophet would slight him by delegating a mere servant to tell him, the commander of the army of Aram, what to do. He was furious because he looked for Elisha to go through some complex ceremony of calling in a loud voice on his God. He expected to see some sensational sign performed on his behalf. He was outraged to think he should be told to bathe in the dirty Jordan River, which he considered far inferior to the Abana and Parfar rivers in his own homeland. Those rivers, he claimed, were much cleaner and much more to the purpose to make him clean. In a temper, Naaman turned to leave, but his own servants wisely spoke to him to obey the prophet. They pointed out to him that if Elisha had instructed him to do some great or difficult task, he would have done it gladly. So why not follow this very simple instruction to wash and be healed? Fortunately, my master was prudent enough to act on the advice of his servants. He proceeded to the Jordan River to immerse himself 7 times. A wonderful thing happened then. When he came up the 7th time, his skin was just like that of a baby without a blemish on it. He was ecstatic. He then humbled himself and returned to Elisha's house. He declared his belief in Israel's God beyond a shadow of a doubt and assured the prophet he would never worship any other God. It thrilled me to hear him proclaim that. Now I need not fear for his soul. I rejoice in my God who does wondrous things. My master desired to give a gift to the prophet, but Elisha refused it. Naaman asked the holy man if he could have a load of earth to carry back to Damascus so he could worship Elisha's God there. He did not understand that God is everywhere and can be worshipped wherever we are. Nevertheless, the prophet granted his request, and Naaman began the journey home with his servants. They had not traveled far when my master noticed the servant of Elisha, a man named Gehazi, running after them. My master stopped his chariot to find out if something was wrong. Gehazi told him that all was well, but that 2 young men, sons of prophets, had just arrived at the prophet's house, and he requested of Naaman a talent of silver and 2 changes of clothes for them. My master, being generous, pressed him to take twice as much money along with the clothes. He instructed his servants to carry the gift for Gehazi, but when they came to a certain tower, he accepted the goods from the men, put them in the house, and waited for the servants to depart. And so my master returned home in perfect health. We celebrated his homecoming with him and the miracle God had performed. Since then, Naaman has prayed to the God of Israel, the God of creation, the one and only God, and worshipped him. Every time he is obliged to take the king to worship his God Rimmon, he asks our God to forgive him. He is always joyful now. My mistress believes also. My life is now fulfilled. I understand that what happened to my family did have a purpose, a special purpose, and through it, 2 wonderful people have become part of my life and also part of God's family with us. Although I wholeheartedly wish that it could have happened without such tragedy in my life, I am convinced that God is gracious and good. He knows what is best for all of his people. He truly turns our mourning into dancing and our sorrow into joy. I will be forever grateful that the Lord did not allow anyone else to find me on that heartbreaking day. I know his perfect will has been fulfilled in my life. I am aware that I was in the place God planned for me, and in his perfect timing for these things to take place. His intention was to turn our enemies' evil into good. I know I will see my parents and sisters and brothers one day. I am no longer timid and fearful little Hannah, but am bold in my God. I praise his name forever. Thank you so much for taking time to listen to my story. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it blessed you in some way. And I just want to say, God bless you for taking the time, and God bless you for everything you do and in every way you follow after him, that you will be supplied with everything you have need of through his riches and glory in Christ Jesus, and that you will follow him all the rest of your days. God bless you.